My name again is Lisa Delman, and what I love to do as a communication specialist is to facilitate dialogue that restores passion, meaning, and purpose to conversations and produces results to the bottom line. In summary, I love to provide customized communication programs that create tools, effective tools for communication and team building and leadership and building better relationships. So on that note, Mike, what I wanted to ask you first is your perspective on listening is a blind spot to a lot of us because we can see with our eyes, but you see with your ears and your other senses. So can you talk about that with the audience?
Absolutely, Lisa. No, and again, it's such a pleasure to be chatting with you today. I truly appreciate this opportunity. And I do believe I bring a very unique perspective to communication because as somebody with a vision impairment within the VI community, I do tend to overlook, based on my natural circumstances, appearance, some of those things that people who have vision focus on. So I don't focus on somebody's hair color. I don't focus on somebody's skin color. I don't focus on whether or not they're smiling at me. I mean, when I walk into a room with my cane, with my white cane, quite honestly, if I bump into you, I'm going to start talking to you. And I focus on the content that comes out of somebody's mouth immediately. And the true advantage to that is very powerful because I don't have those rapid cognitions, those little judgments that are underneath the skin at the subconscious level that predetermine whether or not I should talk to you or I want to talk to you. Quite honestly, it's such an advantage that I think it needs to be talked about even more.
No, it's great, Mike. And so how would you apply these principles, these natural abilities from your perspective? How would you apply these principles? How would you tell somebody that can see how they can use these principles in their communication with other coworkers?
Absolutely. No, it's quite honestly, I leverage the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell a bunch with this material.
Great book.
It's a great book, and he completely quantifies this concept that I'm talking about today. There are so many rapid cognitions that take place in milliseconds with somebody's visual sense, and I do not have those same visual millisecond decisions that are taking place. So I allow the conversation to start, and when you get to conversation, immediately, more quickly, all of a sudden you're able to get to content. And the content is so critical. And over my 18-year IT and network career, I believe it's really what helped me be very successful in a very visual industry. So I allowed conversation, my listening skills, to come up with very quick and clever kind of solutions. I allowed it to create my team, the teams that I worked on, because I would just listen to the content that was coming out. And by doing that, by not passing judgment, by not allowing folks that had director level or C-level kind of titles, it never impeded me because, quite honestly, I wasn't able to recognize who the C-levels or directors were. I was just there to get content. And so it didn't allow me to make those judgments, and I just was after the solutions. And so it's such an asset to shut off for me, it shut off automatically, although it shuts off those judgments. And so if you're just aiming for solutions, if you're just aiming for, requirement gathering, if you just need to be able to talk to your, being an IT and a network nerd, I could talk to all the database folks, I could talk to the storage folks, and quite honestly, it didn't bother me, what they were wearing or where they were sitting, any of those kind of things that people make judgments on. It didn't bother me. I was just out there to create teams, come up with solutions, come up with requirements, and get it delivered.
Okay, so that's great, and I'm so glad that you disseminated this information about your experience. So let me give you my experience. So I'm working with you. I get distracted easily. I am sitting down with you and I have all these visual distractions everywhere. I mean, I have the computer, I have people talking, we have, obviously we know our phone now is like eating food. It's connected to our hip, right? So we have our phone, we can never turn our phone off, God forbid, any time in 24 hours if we ever turn our phone off. So we at work, maybe we have our phone, we have our computer, we're very distracted. So for someone like me who is working with you, or I'm working in a team and I want to implement your principles, what would you tell me to do?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. The book Blink, again, Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, he actually discusses some very simple techniques. And it's exactly what I've utilized over my career too. And believe it or not, it's very simple. He discusses a very, very highly successful salesperson in car sales, actually. And his claim to fame is literally treating everybody that walks in. I mean, he's a car salesman. And so they've got a lot of, when people walk in, people will prejudge just based on, oh, somebody's coming in overalls and maybe dirty work boots. And so therefore, the car salesperson that isn't treating everybody the same is going to look at somebody that's dressed like that completely different than somebody who's going to come in a tie and a suit. Well, it's just very simple. He says everybody that comes to that door gets the exact same treatment. And quite honestly, and that's somebody who's sighted. And that's how I treat people. I actually just, and again, everybody is just a blur to me. And so I believe if you just put your blinders on, you start with the blinders. And if you're in the corporate environment, it is critical. I don't know how many executives, how many teams I've talked to within IT and network all across the country. I know this is international, where the IT departments are always looked at by the business people, by your business stakeholders in a way that is not so flattering. They're like, oh, those IT people again. And the IT people, because I've been on that side, the IT and network people are like, oh man, we got to meet with the business again. Instead of just putting on your blinders, walk into the room and maybe practice a technique where literally you're going to take in a pair of sleeper shades where you're going to cover your eyes when you sit down at the table, and when you're going to sit down and talk about a solution, do not focus on the person across the table from you and listen. It is so powerful. It'll change the way the meeting is going. It'll shorten meetings. If you're just focused on content, if you're just focused on getting to the requirements, if you're just focused on the solution, just listen. It is so very powerful. It's a technique that you heard in Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. It's a technique that I've used over my career, and it's so simple. Just close your eyes and listen.
Well, Mike, it's great advice, and I know just disseminating, giving this information to our audience is great. But I know in a workshop, and actually people experiencing it from your energy and from the blind spot, it is so valuable. It's interesting because you brought up something that reminded me of a story of an individual who shared in one of my workshops. And it went like this. So he works for a very expensive shoe and bag company in Val Harbor in Florida. Val Harbor shops is very, very expensive. It costs you $10 just to be in the parking lot. And so he was saying, because we were talking about this, he said how somebody came in and they had holes in their jeans. So the saleswoman who was supposed to wait on this particular woman prejudged her and walked outside and told him to take care of it. Well, meanwhile, she had bought $50,000 worth of merchandise. So she had lost out on that sale. But more importantly, she had prejudged somebody because the way they were dressed. And so she decided that they weren't going to buy inventory. And she just lost out on that. And so we were talking about that in class, how it's so important not to prejudge and just to treat people with compassion and kindness and really create value, and also listen to the value of the audience member. which I always say that that's where a big disconnect is. But what I really want to get to is I want you to tell us about your journey as you were growing up, the sum of all your experiences, how you got to this place, how you lost your sight. Tell the audience about yourself.
I thank you. I think it's a fairly benign kind of upbringing. I grew up in the Midwest, and I found at an early age that I was losing my eyesight, and quite honestly, it was one of those things growing up in a small town where the local eye doctor, told my mom he's got nothing wrong with his eyes. Make him sit 6 feet away from the television, and he gave me these placebo pair of glasses to wear. And literally within a few days, my mom knew that this was something more serious. That it wasn't just something that was in my head. So about 3 or 4 larger towns later, we ended up in a big hospital in Cleveland, and in the early 70s. Not to age myself, the eye doctor just came out, didn't have a lot of bedside manner, and just told my mom, "Hey, your son's going blind, and he'll be blind by the time he's 18 years old." And as a 7-year-old boy, I looked up at my mom and I said, what is blind? And she just told me, she goes, "It just means you're going to be special, son." And so that seed that was in me, that was planted at that point in time, just made me think that I was going to, I was special. And so it's amazing that little seed, because regardless of my circumstances, in school, I was different, and my mom did not want to put me in a school for the deaf and blind, so I had to figure it out. I had to come up with very clever solutions, and quite honestly, I had to figure out how to make friends, and so being everybody's little bro, and just listening, and it started paving my way, and then getting into college, and then my career. We moved out here to Colorado in 1985, and so this is home for me here in the Denver metro area. And I started my career early in the mid 90s, and just started in IT, and worked my way through, and I just kept competing for very visually centric positions, and ended up as a senior engineer, coming up with solutions that saved companies millions of dollars. And it really wasn't because of my zeros and ones, my binary skills. It was quite honestly because I was able to pull teams together. I was able to gather requirements in a short amount of time, come up and work with all different stakeholders from across the company to make it happen. And it's quite honestly, I truly just believe it's because of my listening skills. I'm able to communicate. I'm able to listen to the actual problem. The business is always wanting to solve for something. And quite honestly, ITers, I believe, IT and network engineers, just they believe, because they're very, very intelligent. It's a very intelligent industry. Although they believe that, oh, God, I know how to solve for this. It's the immediate. Most people want to, they listen with the intent of replying. And especially when you're talking about a very intelligent, skilled kind of person, they want to give their answer right away. And sometimes you just have to shut that off, and you just have to listen. And to me, again, as a VI member, I have an advantage over all of my sighted peers. I'm able just to say, okay, here's what we're solving for. And I'm able to paraphrase it back, and truly not get any of my own ideas on how to solve for something. I want to hear from the business exactly what they want solved, and then we work together. It creates a great synergy when you're coming from the point of truly listening to them.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great, Mike, you're saying this. It's very interesting. In one of my workshops last week, we were talking. Oh, I must have mentioned listening 20 times during that workshop in 4 hours. And really, listening is about collaboration. It's about teamwork. It's about dialogue, which is what I love. That's why I called my company the Dialogue Diva, because I really love listening to people. I loved listening to the value of what people have to say, their brilliance. And see, I find it really interesting what you have to say, because what a lot of people do is they're really listening to themselves. They're not listening to the value of their audience. And people think when I say audience, I mean a large group of people. Audience is anyone that you're talking to. And this is where the disconnect is, because we have so many distractions. And then we're listening to our distractions, and we're also listening to ourselves speak because we're worried about what we have to say, and we miss so much of what the other person has to say because we're not connected with them. We first need to be listening to the value of what someone has to contribute, instead of saying, wow, I want to explain myself, I want to say what I'm about. It's if we could just change our hats a little and say, wow, I'm just going to put my thoughts aside and I'm going to listen openly to what this person has to say, because maybe what this person has to say is brilliant and I can map it onto my brain and my world, and can add so much to the bottom line. It can add so much to a project. So I know we're just touching on this very lightly, that when we do get into the blind spot workshop, that these exercises that we're talking about are going to be very impactful when people can actually experience them, not listen to us. So thank you so much for this. So I want to go on to the next question, which is, how did you, or why did you create the Blind Institute of Technology?
Sure. I've been very successful within the IT and network industry for 18 years, and I just realized that after many years and working for some very large companies, I came across very few other VI members, visually impaired community members, within these very large organizations. And I over the last couple of years, I started doing some due diligence. I started digging into websites like AFB.org, American Foundation for the Blind.org, NFB.org, National Federation of the Blind.org, all of these different websites that are out there that are out there supporting the VI community. They have amazing statistics. At the NFB.org, they say 70% of the VI community is unemployed. AFB.org says 80%. I've seen statistics as high as 81%.
Staggering.
It's atrocious to me, and yet I've been able to make a six-figure income for more than a third of my career in a very competitive, visually centric industry. And so I started thinking to myself, well, I wanted to create legacy in my life, and not just income. I wanted to make an impact. And I wanted to make an impact twofold, Lisa. So I started this concept.
So great.
Well, the IT nerd in me, BIT. So in IT, you have bits and bytes, and so I took blind industry of technology, just as a concept from BIT. And I said, okay, what do I want to impact? And if it's employment, then I need to start with the end game in mind. I need to prove that there's a demand. So I'm working with amazing organizations here locally and across the United States, talking to leadership, talking to executives from these companies, explaining to them exactly how it was I was able to be successful within a visual-centric industry like IT and network. So I build a business case with these executives, and I explain to them the how I was able to use tips, tricks, and technologies to overcome the very real visual obstacles that they encounter. And I just one perception at a time. And I listen to them. I say, so what is it that you're concerned with, that you want to know, that how I was able to solve? And I'm almost always, well, what about Visio documents? What about these process flows? And so I explain to them very quickly how a $20 piece of technology completely mitigates that visual obstacle. So listening to them is critical. Then I explain to them why it is you would want to bring in somebody with a visual impairment. I talk to them about our active listening skills, our communication skills. They're critical for organizations. I explain to them how we're detailed and organized and creative problem solvers. So I'm, again, one perception at a time. I'm changing, and I'm working with amazing organizations here locally in Denver and around the country. Companies like Avaya and Denver Water and Denver Health, WebRoots and gosh, just Comcast and Liberty Media, amazing organizations, and just working with their executive teams to get the perceptions changed to allow, kind of that friendly knock on the door for the VI community. I'm also working with the VI community directly, teaching them some of these tips, tricks, and technologies to make it easier for them when they are there. And one of the major programs that has come out of this VIT effort is our team building skills and team building concept. And that's what I am so excited to be kicking off, because this is going to change organizations so tremendously. And I've had companies like Cricket Communications and Cable Labs and so many companies actively looking for this kind of training internally, because whether it's customer service, whether it's sales, whether it's leadership, project management, any organization within a company, they need to learn how to listen and communicate more effectively. And I'm offering something that is just not out there, sightless principles on how to build your team, how to actively listen from a sightless point of view. And I truly believe that this is going to change organizations. There are so many statistics out there that prove that poor communications cost money to organizations every single day. And so let's take a totally different, unique, revolutionary stand, and let's start taking communications from a sightless point of view to change your organization.
Okay, great, Mike. So a question to you is blind spot. Let me explain to the audience. Well, as you heard Mike before, but I'll explain it again. Mike and I connected together through a mutual friend. And what I love about working with Mike is that I really do feel that he has a unique perspective on listening. As I said, it's really powerful. And so what we've done is we've combined our efforts together to combine a listening program. Because after all, listening is one of the biggest components of communication. And I don't know anybody when my workshops, when I'm teaching speaking or I'm teaching how for someone to write, it's all about how to be a better communicator, how to be a more effective communicator. And as an effective communicator, you have to be listening to the value of your audience. I will say it over and over and over again, and people shake their head, but there is a huge disconnect. And when you can get that one principle, you will be able to collaborate so much more with someone, be able to create such team building activities. So Mike and I have come together to create the blind spot. And what I'm really excited about also too, Mike, is not only helping people listen better, because that is just so important. If we can listen more effectively to each other, then it's going to be better off all the way around. But also, I'm excited to support Mike's nonprofit organization and really help you bridge that gap like you talked about, with 70% of the blind people being unemployed. And so that if we can help through our blind spot and through your other programs to help companies be more aware of what's going on, and also hire more people that have your skills. Now we're hoping that we can disseminate these skills to everybody. Maybe that's a far-reaching skill, that's a far-reaching dream, but it's still a good goal to go after. Give us a sense of what kind of multisensory activity you would utilize in a workshop.
Excellent. Okay, I got you there, Lisa. And quite honestly, it's what we're going to do is we're going to take teams, and we're going to do sitting around a table of 4 or 5 coworkers, and we're going to actually do something that doesn't get done in the workplace. We're going to put some blindfolds or some sleeper shades on these folks, and we're going to sit them around a table, and we're going to allow them to experience producing something, actually making something, a resolution to a problem in the dark. And so it's going to be completely safe. The lights are going to be on. You're just going to be in a blindfold or a sleeper shade. And what it's going to do, it's going to allow you, as somebody who is not is visual, to just listen to your coworkers, to your teammates, and you're leveling the playing field. All of a sudden now you have to truly listen to each other to solve for this problem. And there's going to be different activities that you have to do, and all of a sudden now it's we're all the same. You're all just a voice in the dark, and it's so powerful.
I love it.
It's so very powerful. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. We've got we've got lots of clients that are lined up because they're looking forward to having their teams produce at a higher level, and there's just honestly nobody out there that's even thinking about these sightless principle activities.
Well, it's interesting, Mike, you said that, because I know from doing a lot of workshops and working with a lot of people, I've really come to understand a couple principles. Number one, we need to experience something before we understand it. A lot of times we analyze something, we take information. If information isn't brought to the next level and we don't create dialogue, we don't bring it alive for people to understand it, then it really just sits on a bookshelf. And we know we love books, so there's nothing wrong with books sitting on a bookshelf. But we really do want to take this information, and after somebody is able to experience it, then they're able to understand it. Once you're able to understand it, then you're able to refine it. And once you are able to refine it, then you're able to master it. And then it goes back to refining and mastering, because after all, we have to experience it. How many times has someone told you, okay, this is the way you do this exercise, or okay, this is the way you do this? People they can't help themselves. They listen, but they really understand and listen a lot more after they experience going through the process versus just listening to it from someone else. And that's why I say lecture is different than dialogue. Lecture is getting up in front of the room or giving a PowerPoint presentation, and there's a disconnect with the audience. Dialogue and conversation, enlivened conversation, is about including everybody in that conversation. So it's an enriching dialogue, and it becomes, it just becomes, I guess you could call brainstorming. Yes, yeah, everyone has a voice, and that voice is so unique. It's so special. It's amazing what happens when you give permission to people to express themselves in a way that's safe, and then then everything just goes to the next level. I've seen it over and over again. I've experienced it, and that's why I love doing what I do, because of that reason. That's why I'm so excited to work with you. So I wanted to sum up what we talked about as just a huge disconnect. The huge disconnect is not listening to the value of each other, our audience, i.e. our audience. And listening to each other's brilliance is always what creates the most value for each other. So without it, like you said, we have poor communication and overall mediocre results, often costing companies tons of money. And we know, we've gone over the statistics, which are staggering statistics, just staggering amounts of statistics, and causing relationships to crumble. So really, learning how to listen is not a one-time event. It's a process. It's a process. We're a work in progress. We're a work in progress. So it's really about bringing these communication skills, these listening skills, to the community, your unique listening skills, having people map them onto their experience, and then actually implementing them into strategies so the corporation can go to the next level of productivity. So I want to just thank you so much, Mike, and everyone watching. I hope you received a lot of value. I am I truly am so inspired by you and by the information, by the wisdom that you're sharing, and I'm truly excited to work with you. I also know that there's only so much you can provide through a Skype interview, that actually experiencing you in a workshop is going to be a highlight, I know, for me, and I know it's going to be a highlight for other people. So on that note, thank you so much, Mike. Until next time, remember, for everyone in the audience, to express yourself, be your best, and achieve great results.